Well, Dr. Steve and I, we have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker. And as we were speaking about this morning, we were able to finish out last year with 43 clinical studies, tremendous achievement, and we're not done yet. And each time we do a clinical study, it helps us learn more about our products, better ways to use them, and then also development of new products for the future. And we're very fortunate, and again, this could not have happened if it wasn't for the network marketing industry. One of our members here, Dr. Quila Ryder, if you could give her a big round of applause. Was kind enough to introduce this gentleman to LifeWave, and it got him interested. And I think that followed with you making a call to him.
Right, and it's my honor to introduce Dr. Norm Shealy. He is world-renowned. He is a neurosurgeon. He's been doing, he's on the forefront of integrative medicine for 42 years. He has published numerous papers in scientific journals. He lectures all over the world, and he is a fabulous human being, which I know that you'll find out in just a few minutes. So thank you so much. Norm, can you come forward?
Thank you. It's really a pleasure for me to be here. And first of all, I want to thank David and Dr. Steve for inviting me and coming to visit me a few months ago. And of course, Quila for introducing me to the concept. And I said, well, look, I'd be interested in doing some research on it, because my idea is, David and Steve's, is you want to prove that there's an effect. And so we talked about what might be my favorite, and I thought about insomnia because of silent nights. Because in many respects, insomnia is one of the causes of many of the diseases, as we'll get to in just a moment. But I want to go back just a moment and talk about how I got into looking at the vast array of possibilities that are not drugs or surgery. When I finished my neurosurgical residency at the Mass General Hospital, you're supposed to bow to the east at the very mention of the place, I was convinced that what we were doing was worse than witchcraft. We were cutting spinal cords. We were destroying parts of the brain to control pain. And I wasn't sure whether the surgeons or the patients were crazier for doing this. And I set out to try to find a way of controlling pain without destroying the nervous system and without drugging the people. And that led me, in the mid-60s, to developing something which is pretty well known now, called transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation, or TENS, and dorsal column stimulation, which was an implanted electrical stimulator. And then I was seeing hundreds of people every year who had failed everything. And I wasn't selecting 94% of the patients who were sent to me for anything I had to offer, because I thought they were too damaged to try any of my approaches. So that's how I really went out on a twig and began looking at what else we could do. The next major innovation in my own approach to this was about 16 years ago, when I was invited to go to Kiev. Now, you got to understand, I thought Reagan was correct, that this was the evil empire, it was just after the fall of Russia. But I couldn't resist, because they were doing nanotechnology. And I went over and spent some 12 days learning what they call microwave resonance therapy. Wow! They were treating everything with it. I actually treated an ex-communist boss for his peptic ulcer. And they were talking about applying human DNA frequency to specific acupuncture points and, quote, curing. They use the word looser than we do. But for instance, they said that they had a 92% cure rate for 6 to 24 months with just 10 treatments. And so I brought that back to this country and began working on it, and basically I've concentrated on that. So that 6 years ago, when I finished some of my research, I wrote a book called Life Beyond 100, Secrets of the Fountain. And David, I only thought about living to 150 years. So I've got a new goal to think about now that I've met David. Interestingly, then, when Quila introduced me to this product, I thought, well, insomnia really is the biggest problem for many, many people. The average American sleeps 5.5 hours. That's average. And they don't even consider that insomnia. 200 years ago, the average person slept 10 hours. 40% of Americans do think that they have insomnia. They're sleeping often less than 5 hours. And all major diseases are associated with chronic inadequate sleep. Now, how many of you sleep a minimum of 7 hours well? The rest of you should be using silent nights, because I am here to tell you that I was very pleasantly delighted to see the results that we got in this particular study. We actually chose 25, one dropped out, people with insomnia. And they were evaluated with 3 standard, well-accepted sleep questionnaires. The Leeds Sleep Evaluation Questionnaire looks at the quality of sleep. The Epworth Sleepiness Scale is daytime sleepiness, and the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index actually is the length of sleep. Now, we did a number of other things. We looked at whether or not they were depressed. We looked at the total number of symptoms they had. And we didn't find many changes. Interestingly, to my surprise, only about 50% of them were depressed. I would have thought, if it was me, I'd be stinking depressed if I was not getting adequate sleep. But many of them were not. They didn't seem to have a huge number of symptoms, which also surprised me, but all of them were chronic. I mean, we're talking about not weeks, months, years of problems with adequate sleep. So we gave them the instructions, and of course, those of you who know Silent Nights know that there are 5 specific points that the people may apply the patches to. And I just told them, until you sleep really soundly, you just go through the 5 different sites. And basically, they wound up, most of them trying all 5 of the points, and there was no strong preference. I mean, if you look at it across the board, it was 5 or 6 people using each of these points long term. The Epworth Daytime Sleepiness Score decreased 72%. That means during the day, they reported 72% less sleepiness than before. That's very striking improvement. On the Leeds quality of sleep, they improved 80%. That's their assessment, depending upon this questionnaire, of how much better, not just how much longer, but how much better they were sleeping. And finally, the one that most of us would think of as the most important part of the test was the Pittsburgh, the length of sleep. That improved 88%. So if you took someone who was sleeping only 4 hours, and they're now sleeping almost twice that, over 7 hours average, this is better than any known drug in the world, and safer, with there weren't any negative effects, of course, in this group of people. Interestingly, of course, I then told them how to get in touch with Quila if they wanted to stay on the patches. Some of them have told me even weeks afterwards they were still sleeping better. Just that 1 month of using the Silent Nights had somehow reset their thermostat so that they were sleeping better. That's the slide that was going to be before. To me, theoretically, if we would have followed these people over the next 10 years, the quality of their life should improve strikingly. I mean, there are all kinds of studies showing how important it is to get adequate sleep. And so by using this, and it seems to me that a minimum of 40% of Americans should be doing this. It would improve, I mean, just think of that, 40% of people having their health improved just by using something this simple. Now, if you take the fact that most Americans aren't even sleeping, even though they don't complain of insomnia, they're not sleeping adequate length of time, it could have a powerful effect on almost everybody because a majority of people are not getting adequate sleep. It could probably change obesity. It could probably change heart disease and diabetes. These three huge illnesses just by having people sleep better. Now, obviously, there are other things. In the meantime, David and Dr. Steve came to visit me, and I brought our farm foreman, who's been with us for 20 years. And before Joe came to visit, work for us, he'd had 7 operations on his shoulder. And he had used, before he even knew me, my TENS device to help control his pain. But it's cumbersome. You can't work as a farm foreman very well wearing a TENS device all day. And I had tried at least a dozen different approaches to Joe's shoulder pain. While they were there, we put on IceWave patches. I don't think it was 3 minutes, maybe 2. Joe was free of pain for the first time in well over 20 years. I mean, this is remarkable. He has used the patches only once or twice in the ensuing 3 months, and he's still free of his shoulder pain. I mean, it's the best I've seen. I've had a chance to play with a few other people. I haven't done a research project specifically on this, but I was doing a workshop in Hilton Head last month, and 2 of my students in my class had chronic back pain, so I happened to have taken some IceWave patches with me, and I put them on them. Now, one of the students I didn't see after that day, but her pain was gone within 5 minutes or less. And the other woman I saw every day for the next 2 days, and she was still free of pain from my application. So I at least am reasonably sure that that is another of the remarkably safe things that one can use to help many people with chronic pain. And after discussing with David and Steve what else was on the horizon, I made a suggestion that we should consider studying reductions of prostate-specific antigen. I have this personal fetish. I don't want any urologist in the world to know I have a prostate gland. I say that on my radio show almost every week because, you know, they want to stick 30 needles in your prostate gland, which to me is absolutely barbarian nonsense. You couldn't pay me to have a needle stuck in my prostate gland. I mean, I'd rather be dead. And, I mean, you're entering the third most vascular organ in the body with a needle 30 times, and you might go through cancer and miss it. I mean, come on. At any rate, so we're now doing a small pilot study on 10 men who have a PSA elevated upon the magic number of, above the magic number of 4, which is when the urologists want to stick needles in your prostate. I've only got a couple of weeks under my belt with doing that, but the first 2 people who finished 2 weeks, their PSA is down about 10%. So it looks as if it's going to be another positive thing. Prior to learning about LifeWave, I'd concentrated on what I would call electromagnetic nanotechnology. I've written several papers on it. I've talked many places about the use of nanotechnology because what we've been doing is electrically stimulating various acupuncture points with 54 to 78 billion cycles per second at 75 decibels of intensity, which is a billionth of a watt per centimeter square, a billionth of a watt per centimeter square. And that's what we've been applying to acupuncture points for the last 15 years. And we've demonstrated doing that that we can do a number of things. We can raise DHEA. That is helpful in people with migraine. Now, this is one of the reasons I'm going into this, because I think now I would like to challenge you who are getting excess to Eon to consider this. In the people where we raised DHEA, we also did a study on migraine. And we got 75% of people with frequent migraine markedly improved by using the circuit that we used to raise DHEA. We got 80% of people with diabetic neuropathy to get rid of their pain and improve their sensation. We got 70% of people who had failed conventional medicine with rheumatoid arthritis, markedly improved with this particular approach. We got 70% of people out of depression with that particular approach. We've also had circuits which we could stimulate, which would raise calcitonin, which makes the bone stronger and also helps relieve pain. And we've had another circuit where we could reduce free radicals 85%. And of course, we've heard a lot about that already today. So now you have a product which theoretically can do all of those things at the same time. So I would hope that those of you who are in the field will take advantage of Eon to use for all of these things, because I think it's well worth trying. If we look at reducing inflammation, reducing free radicals, or reducing homocysteine, those things are going to help a wide variety of people with almost every major illness. And so I personally am certainly going to explore the possibility of how well these affect those enzymes and hormones that are important, but I encourage you to do the same thing. And of course, I would like to encourage all of you to push Silent Nights to help our country sleep better. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Shealy, as you can tell, is an absolute expert in his field, and we are just so grateful and feel very fortunate that he's found the time to join us in this great effort. And again, thanks to Dr. Quila for introducing us to him, and thanks to Dr. Shealy for not only being a brilliant guy, but also having the soul of a healer. So thank you, Dr. Shealy.